A member of the 2023 Jets caught the game-winning touchdown last night in Super Bowl 58. A lot of Jets fans are fired up because the team traded Mecole Hardman. You should be fired up, but that's the wrong reason. I'll give you the right reason to be fired up about Mecole Hardman today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Monday, February 12th, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. Subscribe to the show for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you'll get new episodes as soon as they're posted. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match of up to $100. Well, Super Bowl 58 is in the books. The Kansas City Chiefs become the first team in the NFL to repeat as Super Bowl champions in almost 20 years, and the hero was a member of the 2023 New York Jets as Mecole Hardman caught the touchdown pass that won the game in overtime, a short pass from Patrick Mahomes to Mecole Hardman. Hardman began the season with the Jets, really did not carve out much of a role with the team, had one catch for 6 yards in the waning moments of the Jets' Week 2 blowout loss to Dallas. Then, a few weeks later, he was sent to Kansas City. He was sent back to his original team. The Jets signed him this offseason from Kansas City, could not find a role for him, so they sent him back to Kansas City for a late-round pick swap next year. Jets send a 7 with Hardman to Kansas City. Chiefs send a 6 to New York. And after Hardman becomes the hero of Super Bowl 58, the reactions this morning and last night were predictable. People are saying, well, how could the Jets not carve out a role for Mecole Hardman? Now, I think people are right to be frustrated with the Jets over Mecole Hardman, but not for those reasons. So let me explain. It's easy to say Mecole Hardman caught the game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl. As we know, sometimes somebody can be the hero of the Super Bowl and not be a particularly distinguished player. And that's the case with Mecole Hardman. I mean, I know Hardman did not carve out much of a role with the Jets, but let's look at what he did before the Super Bowl, because I think that this is pretty important. Hardman was not much of an entity in the Chiefs' offense this season. In fact, in 12 games back in Kansas City in the regular season, he only had 14 catches. And let me take that a step further. 6 of those 14 catches came in a Week 18 game against the Chargers where the Chiefs were resting their starters because they had already clinched their playoff positioning. They were already the 3 seed. Mahomes did not even play in that game. So 6 of his 14 catches in 12 games were in that one game against the Chargers. So really, we're talking 8 catches in 11 games. And then the playoffs, the first 3 games, he had 2 catches for 5 yards. His most memorable contribution all season long, prior to the Super Bowl, his biggest contribution to the Chiefs was a fumble on the goal line against Buffalo at a point in the second half where the Chiefs were about to take control of the game completely. So I'm not going to sit here and shed tears for Mecole Hardman. I'm not going to give you the take that, Mecole Hardman, how could the Jets not have found a role for him? Because the Chiefs didn't have a role for him up to last night. Sometimes guys step up in the Super Bowl. David Tyree, good example. If you go back 30 years, Larry Brown, a corner with the Cowboys, had two interceptions on Neil O'Donnell, got him a big payday from the Raiders that offseason, but really was not much of a corner. Desmond Howard, a year later, was one of the premier return men in the NFL, had a touchdown return on a kickoff in the Super Bowl 31 against the Patriots. Just having a big moment in the Super Bowl doesn't necessarily make you a great player. And if you watch that play, Hardman was schemed open. You look at the way the formation, the route distribution, Hardman was wide open. It was a walk-in touchdown. So you can't sit there and say, how could the Jets not have found a role for this guy when probably like 99% of skill players in the NFL are going to make that play, if not 100. He was wide open. It was a walk-in touchdown. I might have been able to make that catch. This is not about that. It's not about the Jets let a skilled player leave the building. The first issue, and this is the big issue, watch that play again. Listen to what I just said. You'll see Hardman was schemed open. This was about scheme. It was easy. It was like the simplest play a receiver can execute. It was an easy throw for Patrick Mahomes. Andy Reid does that a lot. Now, think about the Jets offense in 2023. The issue is not Mecole Hardman. The issue is, why don't the Jets make things as easy on offense as the Chiefs do for their players? Because even a Mecole Hardman, who isn't very good, has a chance to score the game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl with the proper scheming. Jets never do that. Jets are behind the times on offense. They never. That's modern offense in the NFL. You find ways to get guys the ball. You find ways to make it easy for your players by how you distribute them across the field, how you distribute them pre-snap, based on where their routes are going. The 49ers were never going to be able to defend that play. If they did, it would have been an out. It would have taken a great play to stop it. That was scheme. Jets don't have a scheme. Jets have Nathaniel Hackett. Why is this guy being brought back? That's what you should be mad about. Not that the Jets let some budding star receiver go. Now, I understand if you want to say the Jets should have given him a shot before they traded him. I said that myself at the time. Jets certainly should not have been giving him snaps, giving Randall Cobb snaps before at the expense of Hardman. Cobb was completely finished. Hardman at least showed that he can produce a little bit in the NFL last night. But at the end of the day, Mecole Hardman is a guy who has never had a 700-yard season. Never so much as that, playing almost his entire career in Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. You want to get on the Jets for something, another thing you could get on them for is signing this guy in the first place. Because listen to what I just said. The guy never produced for Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. It was a bit silly for the Jets to think that they were going to be able to get more out of him than Andy Reid could. Because, again, look at the Jets' offense. Look at the Jets' scheme. It's no good. It doesn't produce. I was thinking yesterday about Nathaniel Hackett's father, Paul Hackett, who was the Jets' offensive coordinator from 2001 to 2004. And much like his son, he was a very unpopular figure at the time. And, I don't like to compare fathers to sons all that much because, I love my dad, greatest man I've ever met. But I do things differently than him. I don't agree with him on everything. So I don't like to automatically just say the son's the same as the father. But in this case, the son is the same as the father, because I was thinking back to Paul Hackett, back when he was offensive coordinator. And he was, again, a very unpopular figure if you weren't around then. And one of the biggest issues with him was his offense was just so behind the times. His system was so ancient. It was 2004, and the Jets lacked any formation in their playbook from the shotgun. That's 2004. Now, it's not the NFL of 2023, 2024, where you're operating mostly out of the shotgun, but even then, that was an outdated offense. And this is, if you were looking for one example, sometimes it's difficult to explain to you why Hackett's offense is outdated. This is actually the perfect example, because there are so few plays where the Jets get guys open based on the way the play is designed. There's so few plays that make it easy on the players on offense, the quarterback and the receivers. That's why you should be angry. Not about the player, but about how the player succeeded. And almost any player in the NFL can produce a little bit if you put him in the right scheme, if you make life easy for him. That's what the Kansas City Chiefs did last night with Mecole Hardman. Now, the Jets made their own news last night, and it was a very bizarre timing, but it is very popular news within the fan base. I think, even though a lot of people probably don't realize it yet, they'll be very happy about it. And it's about the uniforms. Jets announced a uniform change. What are they going to be wearing in 2024? Well, we know one of their three uniforms, and we'll talk about that more as we continue on this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. This episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with over 3 million members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. You pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. It's demon time now on PrizePicks. You can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Demons and Goblins is the newest and most exciting way to play at PrizePicks. Squares marked with red demons or green goblins get you different payouts, and you can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match of up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL. It's one word with no space, LOCKEDONNFL, LockedOnNFL, for a first deposit match of up to $100 on PrizePicks. Thank you for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day, and a big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday, and bonus episodes as needed, as breaking news dictates. Well, the Jets, I don't want to say they made headlines after the Super Bowl because I don't think it got a lot of attention, and the fact it didn't get a lot of attention says that this may not have been the best time to announce it, but the Jets did make an announcement. It's somewhat significant. It's not a player acquisition. It's not something that's going to impact their win-loss record, but it's something that will be popular in the fan base. The Jets announced that they will be changing their uniforms in 2024, and that one of the uniforms they will use is the Legacy Whites, which were used Week 1 in the win against the Buffalo Bills and Week 4 in the loss to the now, once again, Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. And I think it's fair to say that this will be a very popular move within the fan base. When we talk about uniform design, what people like and what people don't like, very much a subjective thing, very much a matter of opinion. Everybody has their own styles that they like. Everybody has their own styles they dislike. But I think this fan base is actually pretty uniform, pretty unanimous on one thing. They don't like, or two things actually. They don't like the current Jets uniforms, and they really like the uniforms the Jets wore Week 1 and Week 4. If you're not familiar with them, you can go back and look at some of the pictures, or you can go watch a video on YouTube of the Jets playing in one of those games to see what the uniforms are like. But they're kind of like a modern spin on the uniforms the Jets wore in the 80s and the 90s. And, if you were a fan who grew up in the 80s, you may remember them with some degree of joy because those were the uniforms the Jets wore during the New York Sack Exchange days, which was one of the great eras in team history. If you think about great eras in Jets history, number one's Namath. Number 2 is the Sack Exchange, and then maybe that 1 year with Parcells, if it counts as an era, and then those 2 years with Rex Ryan. We don't really have a great tradition of winning with the Jets, but those uniforms do tie back to one of the truly great eras in Jets history, and they just look good. The current Jets uniforms, I've never been a big fan of them. They, first of all, like the Jets, the team's named the Jets, and there's nothing on them that no part of the logo, no part of the uniform that suggests that that shows you that the team is named the Jets. There's no like airplane or anything like that. Maybe a minor quibble, but the logo right now is very bland, very boring. I'm happy the Jets are making this change. I think the new uniforms look great. The Jets also announced that they will unveil at a later date green and black uniforms. If I have like one quibble with this, I don't understand this team's focus on making black one of its primary colors. The Jets been green and white forever, and it was a little disappointing to me this year. And it's on the list of disappointments for the New York Jets this season, very low on the list. But Jets did not wear green enough. And this team's green and white, so that would be my one quibble. The other quibble would be the timing of this, which is just bizarre. This tweet, they sent out a tweet, or the X, or whatever you want to call it. They sent out the post on social media literally minutes after Hardman scored that touchdown to win the Super Bowl. So, did the Jets think they were going to, upstage the Super Bowl? They think they were going to, what was the goal? Was the goal to, win the offseason championship? The offseason's begun. Let's get off to a great start, and announce we're changing uniforms. Did the Jets think they were going to, placate fans who were angry about the season? Maybe the fans that seeing the Super Bowl end and realizing the Jets are so far away, does that make does changing the uniforms make the fans forgive them? I don't know I don't know why the Jets waited and did this. I don't know why the Jets didn't wait a little bit, because if they announced this later this week or next week, it would have gotten a big reaction. It would have gotten a lot of coverage, because we're entering into one of the periods where there's not really a lot going on in the NFL. Yeah, there's the draft preparation process, there's all the speculation about the offseason, but we're entering a quieter time in the NFL. The time after the Super Bowl does not have as much going on. And if you think back, while these uniforms, I think most of us agree the current uniforms, the uniforms from 2019 to 2023, don't look particularly great. There's also a lot of symbolism behind those uniforms, because if you remember, the Jets did this big event to unveil them, and the players who were part of it were guys like Sam Darnold and Chris Herndon and Quincy Enunwa, Jamal Adams, guys who were not with the team much longer. And if you think, the Jets started wearing these uniforms the first year of Adam Gase's tenure. And I know the uniforms had nothing to do with them winning or losing, but think about what I just mentioned when we talk about the uniforms they'll be wearing, how they harken back to the Sack Exchange. I like the uniforms the Jets wore between 1998 and 2018. because those harken back to those were similar to the uniforms Joe Namath wore. I like the idea of thinking back to great eras in the franchise history. I like the idea of paying homage to a great era, some of the few great eras in Jets history. And I think that's what these new uniforms will do, even if they don't really have that big of an impact on the field. And when I think about the uniforms the Jets wore from 2019 to 2023, well, I think about Adam Gase. I think about these struggles. I think about Robert Saleh. I think about Aaron Rodgers, even though I know Rodgers did get injured wearing the uniform the Jets are going to be wearing next year. But it's just been a bad era. It's been a bad 5 seasons for the New York Jets. You know, you think about the miserable Adam Gase years. You think about all the false starts these last couple of years. And Jets were finally at the point, the NFL league rules on this apparently are that you can only change your uniforms like every 5 years or something. It's something to that effect, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, because you should be able to change your uniform whenever you want, and it's a good opportunity for the NFL. It's a good opportunity for the teams. They get it the more they change the uniforms, the more jerseys they have to sell, the more merchandise they have out there. I would go to the the NBA model. The NBA, every team has 4 or 5 uniforms, and they can change them every year. So if you get a bad uniform, you just take it out of the cycle the next year. And plus, there are 4 others if you have one bad uniform. I think that's a much more logical step for the NFL. But in any event, New York Jets, much better unit. Well, at least, I don't know how the quality of play will be on the field for this team in 2024. But even if the quality of play isn't a lot higher, at least they'll look better. And I don't know if that's probably a very small consolation, but yeah, the current uniforms they don't look good. I don't like the New York on the front. I don't like the stripes. Don't like the color schemes. I think this is going to be an upgrade for the New York Jets. And again, if the Jets had picked like literally any other time to announce this would be a very popular decision. This would be something that'd be going viral today. But I don't know. The Jets decided to announce this like minutes after the Super Bowl ended. In any event, some good news, even if it's mild good news, even if it's not earth-shattering, even if it's not going to impact the team on the field. I think some positive news. Of course, we're focused on what happens on the field. Super Bowl just concluded. Jets had Super Bowl dreams this past season that were more or less eliminated when Aaron Rodgers went down 4 plays into the season, or a little bit later, maybe a little bit later in the fall. Jets did not come close to the Super Bowl, though. Can they get to the Super Bowl in 2024? Look, I'm going to be honest with you. It's tough. There are 3 narrow paths I see that could potentially make the Jets a surprise participant in Super Bowl 59 next year. I'll tell you what they are as we continue this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by DoorDash. Of course, if you watched last night, it was a tremendous game between the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers. Went to overtime, but as usual, the commercials stole the show. DoorDash went all out for game day and DoorDashed stuff from the ads to one lucky winner, car, snacks, even tax software, and somehow they pulled it off. Now, I'm a little bummed I didn't win, but I have to hand it to them. It was one heck of a delivery. You should know that DoorDash is the all-in-one app for your everyday needs, from restaurants and groceries to flowers and gifts. So the next time you're running low on dinner ideas, pet supplies, or just time, you can get so much more than you realize delivered. Whichever party or anything party you got coming up, whatever watch party or anything party you've got coming up, get it delivered with DoorDash. Football season may be over, but we're in the thick of basketball games, the school year, and let's face it, winter. And I can think of a million reasons to order DoorDash. Hop on the app and make your day a little bit easier. Again, on DoorDash. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Monday, the day after Super Bowl 58. Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs, who have repeated as Super Bowl champions, win their 3rd championship in the last 5 years, officially cement their status as a dynasty, as the team of the post-Brady Belichick Patriots era. I think safe to say all of that, which naturally leads to the question, how do the Jets get to the Super Bowl? I think every year, the day after the Super Bowl, the 30 NFL fan bases are thinking, how do we get our team there? And I'm not going to lie to you. For the Jets, it's going to be very difficult. This is not a team with a lot of cap space, projected about $5 million currently. They can move some money around, but they don't have a ton of flexibility. I mean, I think they're probably going to end up restructuring deals, adding void years to contracts, more or less lowering 2024 cap hits and pushing that money into the future. Money doesn't go away, it will go into the future. That's what the Jets are going to need to do to clear out cap space. And the Jets are not really, if I think we're being objective, if you saw those two teams last night, the Jets are not really in that class. Now, they may be in that class on the defensive side of the ball. They may be on that class on the special team side of the ball. And special teams did play a big role in that game. 49ers muffing a punt. Right? I don't know if it's a muff if like a guy accidentally touches it, doesn't realize where he is, but muffing a punt deep in their territory, which set up a touchdown, and then 49ers botching an extra point. Meanwhile, the Chiefs, Harrison Buckner setting a Super Bowl record long kick, breaking a record that was actually set earlier in the game on a actually successful 49ers special teams play. But Jets, they may have special teams and defense. They don't really have the offense to be a Super Bowl team at the moment. So how do they get there? I think there are three potential paths for the New York Jets. And again, I don't think any of these is potentially likely, but why do we watch the games? Because we want to believe, we want to dream. The first and most likely path is the Jets entered next season as a team that's not really Super Bowl caliber, and it doesn't really apply this year. It hasn't really applied a lot lately, but there was a stretch about 10, 15 years ago, where there were teams that weren't that great. There were teams that were just kind of okay, maybe a little bit above average, who got hot at the right time. The two Giants runs, 2007, 2011. 2007 Giants team was the team that was like slightly above average. 2011 Giants, 2011 Giants would be the worst team to ever win the Super Bowl. That may have been a below average football team that just got hot at the right time. They snuck into the playoffs in a bad division and just caught fire and caught the breaks they needed. Aaron Rodgers has won Super Bowl. Aaron Rodgers was the one seed a lot in the NFC. His one team that won the Super Bowl barely snuck into the playoffs. They needed to beat the Chicago Bears the last week of the regular season just to get in. Only won 10 games that season, went on a run. In 2012, the Ravens, another team that got hot at the right time. Lately, we've seen a lot of top seeds in the Super Bowl, but in the NFL, it's any given Sunday. It's a one-game scenario. So if the Jets just improve their offensive line a little bit, if they improve their receiver group a little bit, maybe they could sneak into the playoffs. And if you get into the playoffs, it is possible to go on a run. Not super likely. The second scenario is Aaron Rodgers bouncing back and playing at MVP Aaron Rodgers level. A great quarterback, a Hall of Fame quarterback, can make up for a lot of issues. This was not the most talented offense of the Mahomes era. This was not even close. This may have been the least talented offense the Chiefs had in the entire Patrick Mahomes era. They really did not have a whole lot in the receiving game outside of maybe Rice and Kelsey. They had issues on the offensive line, Joe Thuney getting injured in the playoffs. But a great quarterback covers for a lot of issues. And if Aaron Rodgers cuts back in his vintage Aaron Rodgers, this team can go a long way. Now, that's a lot to ask. All of this is a lot to ask. All three scenarios I'm laying out here are an awful lot to ask, and none of them are particularly likely. This is really tough, though, because, again, Rodgers is 40. He's coming off an injury that can be a career ender, especially for an older guy. So I think at the very least his movement ability, which is one of the key aspects of his game, it's been one of the key aspects of his game. Maybe he's not a guy who gains a lot of yards on the ground, but his ability to extend plays, that's probably going to be compromised. We already saw that kind of going away the last couple of years of Green Bay. We also saw potential signs of decline the last year he had with the Packers. So asking him to find the fountain of youth, it's a lot to ask, but I don't think you can rule it out. I don't think it's I'm not expecting Rodgers to be MVP Rodgers again, but maybe there's like a small chance, I don't know, like a 2% chance, a 5% chance that he can be great and carry the team. And the third scenario, which probably maybe the least likely. I mean, you can argue which of the two is less likely between Rodgers playing an MVP level or this. Just need to have the best offseason in the NFL. To navigate the situation where you probably need 3 offensive linemen and at least 1 receiver, maybe 2 receivers, and to do it with the resources the Jets have, where they're down a second-round pick, they're short on draft picks, where they don't have much cap space. Jets are just going to need to find the bargains. Jets are going to need to find the undervalued players. And it's possible. You're always one offseason away in the NFL. Chiefs, part of the reason they won the Super Bowl, they made a lot of great signings on the defensive side of the ball. They found some really good value guys on the defensive side of the ball this past offseason. It's not going to be easy, though. I've seen people say, well, Jets, if we just get another draft class like 2022. Well, the challenge with that, first of all, is that in 2022, you had 4 picks in the top 40. So this wasn't like it fell out of the sky. The draft class didn't. Now, credit to the Jets because they hit on all 4 picks. Just because you have the picks doesn't mean you're going to hit on them. We know that very well. We've seen the Jets whiff on a number of early picks through the year. So credit to the Jets for getting 4 out of 4. But that's not easy to do. And it's much tougher to do when you only have 1 pick in the top 70. And to get more picks in the top 70, they'll have to give up something of value and create another hole. So that's not that it's easy to say we could just have another draft class. Well, beyond that, even if we move past the resources, which are nowhere near as big as they were 2 years ago, that's a once in a generation draft class. To ask for a second once in a generation draft class in 3 years, that's very difficult to do. And the offensive line, you can say, well, the Jets can just need to rebuild their offensive line. Well, we've been talking about that for years. What have the Jets been trying to do? So there's no guarantees they're going to be able to do it. But it's always possible. Hope springs eternal. Maybe they can do it. How do they do it? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in the days and weeks ahead on the podcast. We'll be here all off season long. But that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. If you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy it and are listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy this episode, give it a big thumbs up. It helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Monday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.